74% of managers were never trained to manage people. They were just promoted. And if you're good at your job, that's exactly what's coming for you. Not because you asked for it, not because you're ready, but because the system assumes something that isn't actually true, that success means going up, more responsibility, more people, more meetings, more pressure, that if you're good, the next step is obvious. But here's the part nobody says out loud. The skills that make you great at your job are usually the exact skills that make you worse at the next one. And that's not opinion. That's a pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. You've probably watched it happen. Someone on your team, sharp, reliable, fast, they get promoted. Everyone claps. It makes sense. It feels deserved. And then, slowly, things change. Deadlines slip. Communication gets messy. Small problems start taking longer to solve. Decisions that used to be instant now drag. The energy of the team shifts, not dramatically, not all at once, just enough that you feel it. Something is off. And nobody really says anything. Because on paper, it still looks right. They earned it. They deserved it. So what actually happened? Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Back in 1969, a psychologist named Lawrence Peter noticed something strange. Across companies, across industries, people kept getting promoted, higher and higher and higher, until eventually they reached a role they weren't good at, and then they stopped. Not because they quit, not because they were fired, but because they had reached their level of incompetence. He called it the Peter Principle, and it's brutally simple. You get promoted for doing your current job well, but the next job requires completely different skills. And if you struggle, you stop moving up. But you also don't move back down. So organizations slowly fill with people, operating right at the edge of what they can handle. Not great, not terrible, just stuck. Now, at first, this sounds like a theory, something clever, something abstract. But then the data came, and this is where it gets worse. In 2019, researchers analyzed performance across thousands of employees, real companies, real promotions, and they found something most people instinctively feel, but rarely say. The best individual performers consistently became worse managers. Not always, but often enough to show a pattern. And when you actually think about it, it makes perfect sense. Being great individually usually means you move fast, you think independently, you solve problems yourself, you take ownership, you execute without needing direction. But managing people, that's a completely different game. Now your job is slowing down, explaining your thinking, aligning different personalities, resolving conflict, being patient when others don't move at your speed. You're not doing the work anymore. You're responsible for other people doing it. And those are not the same skill. In fact, they often pull in opposite directions. So the very thing that got you promoted becomes the thing that makes the new role harder. And it doesn't stop there. Because promotions don't happen during average performance. They happen during peaks. A stretch where everything clicks, projects land, results spike, timing aligns, and leadership notices. That moment becomes your identity. That's who they are. But here's the problem. Peaks don't last. They regress. That's not pessimism. That's math. Extreme results naturally drift back toward average. Not because you got worse, but because the conditions changed. So now think about the timing. You get promoted at your peak into a harder role, right as your performance is naturally coming back down. From the outside, people say the promotion changed them. But what actually changed was the environment, the expectations, the rules of the game, and now you're trying to keep up in a role you were never trained for. This is where most people say yes, automatically, without thinking. because saying no feels wrong. It feels like giving up. It feels like you're falling behind. And the pressure is real. Social pressure, financial pressure, status pressure. The person who says yes gets the title. The person who doesn't gets questions. Why didn't you take it? Are you not ready? Do you not want to grow? And over time, that gap starts to feel like a judgment, like you're missing something, like you're doing it wrong. So people say yes, even when something feels off, even when they're unsure, even when deep down they know they're stepping into something completely different. And this is the part most advice ignores because the self help version of this conversation always sounds the same. Step up, take the opportunity, bet on yourself. But it skips something critical. Not every opportunity is aligned with your strengths. And not every next step is actually forward. Sometimes it's sideways, or worse, backward, just with a better title. So, what's the alternative? Because obviously, you don't want to stay stuck. You don't want to avoid growth. You don't want to play small. That's not the point. The point is precision, because the people who stay where they are, genuinely exceptional, don't just perform, they compound. They get faster, sharper, more valuable over time. They become the person everyone depends on, the person who quietly carries systems, the person who actually makes things work. And when companies go through cuts, and they always do, those people are easier to justify keeping because their value is clear, it's visible, it's undeniable. Compare that to a mid level manager whose value is spread across meetings, across coordination, across decisions that are harder to measure, harder to quantify, harder to defend. So, this idea that going up is always safer isn't necessarily true. Sometimes mastery is a safer position, not because it's easier, but because it's clearer. So, what do you actually do with this? First, separate the reward from the role. Most people don't actually want management, they want what comes with it: more money, more recognition, more autonomy. But the promotion is just one delivery system, not the only one. In many companies, especially technical ones, there are parallel tracks, ways to grow without managing. And if your company doesn't offer that, you can sometimes create it by expanding your scope, taking on more complex work, becoming the person others rely on. You make the case that your value increases when you stay in execution, not when you leave it. Some companies will understand that, some won't, and that tells you everything. Second, be honest about your own performance, not where you think you should be good, not where the title sounds impressive, but where you actually perform at your best, where things feel natural, where results come consistently, where you don't have to force it. Because there's a difference between looking successful and actually being effective. And most people chase the first one at the cost of the second. Third, stop treating no like it's permanent. Saying no right now doesn't mean no forever. Timing matters, context matters. You can revisit opportunities later with more clarity, more experience, more intention. That's not failure, that's control.